Hebrew 11:32-40. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms and administered justice and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned into strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawn into two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and ill-treated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. They were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect.
When I first saw the passage, I thought, how am I going to preach on that, or speak on that, not preach? It all seemed so awful and gory and depressing, and I thought, thank you, Nigel, that's very kind of you. Especially as Alan was supposed to be doing today, and I was doing the nice bit on the beginning of 12, Hebrews 12. But when I got into it, I realised actually every bit has got something glorious about it if you dig deep enough. And this is about our faith. The whole of this chapter 11 is about faith. It's the confidence in what we hope for and the assurance about what we do not see. That thing that today the Holy Spirit gives to us when we need it. In chapter 11, Paul reminds the Hebrews of their ancestors. Instead of impressing upon them how they kept every point of the law and discussed doctrine, he starts each verse with, by faith. Beginning with, by faith, the universe was created not out of what was visible, but what was invisible. And I don't know if any of you have been watching those Brian Cox programs about the universe, and they're making bigger and better telescopes and bigger and better telescopes trying to find the origins of the universe. But of course, they're asking the wrong questions and looking in the wrong places, because the creator of the universe is invisible. The earth was not made out of bits of the earth. It was created by God in his own way. Paul moves through the Old Testament greats, starting each memory with by faith. Tells of Enoch, who's taken away by God before death because he pleased God. But Paul says, without faith, it's impossible to please God. Noah, by faith, built the ark because he had, it says, a holy fear of God. He too became an heir of righteousness. People mocked him, they thought he was balmy, but he kept going, he built the ark. He did what God required of him by faith. On and on through the roll call of faithful men and women of faith, without whom the promise of God could not have been fulfilled. Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Joshua. Then Paul comes to the part we've read this morning. You can imagine him shuffling his large sheets of parchment and saying, well, what more shall I say? I haven't got room for any more. It's a bit like one of those airmail letters, if you remember airmail letters, where people used to put as much as they could on it, so they'd write along down it and then up the side and along the top. I get the feeling it might have been a bit like that, but he's got so many people to fit in. He said, I haven't time to go into detail about all the rest of the faithful. He just sort of outlines their deeds and their sacrifices, which are absolutely gruesome. And you think all this was done by faith. People who had never seen Jesus, who had never experienced the gift of the Holy Spirit in the way that we have. But they carried on by faith. A lot of these accounts feature in the Maccabees, the bits that come in a sort of legends, a series of legends that form an era or a time between the Old Testament and the New Testament, a kind of dark ages where we think, oh, nothing happened there between the Old Testament and New Testament, you know, everything was promised and then everything went dead. Well, God was still there working through people who by faith kept the baton going, if you like, which would be next week's or next Zoom's sermon, carrying the baton on. Suddenly, light streams into the world. The person of God's Son, Jesus Christ, the one promised from the beginning, comes onto the scene. It's a bit like the credit roll for an epic movie entitled God the Father. At the beginning, you get the list of top stars, Noah, Abraham, David, gradually working down to the second grip and third gopher, whatever those are, first ark carrier and fourth trumpeter around the walls of Jericho. There, as the Jewish people think it's over and stream out the cinema without waiting for the sequel, God the Son, sometimes sequels are a disappointment, but this one is nothing but a culmination of everything that's been promised. In verses 39 and 40, we come to the point of the whole chapter. These, meaning all these people who are already credited, they were commended for their faith. Yet none of them received what had been promised, the Messiah, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. All those credited with faith in the past have been kept until the day that God could accomplish his work of restoring the universe to righteousness through the death and resurrection of his Son, Jesus Christ. And then the credits roll on. The credits roll on through the ages to the present day, the list of people who've lived by faith in the Son of God through the Holy Spirit, who have come into the promise of God straight away by faith. We're trying to think of names of people and families of people in our church who've gone before us, people who carried on the flame, as it were, carried it on through the last years that we remember. The Woodhams, Vindens, Morrises, Seamers, Caddicks, Archers, Wocks, Tuttle, Griffin, people who many now don't remember, but faithfully, by faith, have kept the promise and keep God's work moving on. We have already entered into the promise. Our lives have inspired us to faith. Who in your life, I wonder, has inspired you to faith? I can look back on my life and think of the people who helped me to come to faith, to become a Christian, and those who've helped me to become someone who knows him better. And who are you inspiring today? You may not actually sit down with the Bible with someone, but who do you draw alongside and talk to? Who do you ring up and give a comforting word to? That's all part of the promise and plan. What hardships and difficulties are you facing, which require a huge step of faith? Illness, family problems, work, home issues, pandemic, things that we don't think are terribly important, but God is alongside us anyway. And which suffering Christians around the world are we praying for? And our own missionaries. We're all part of this big story. But instead of having to wait, we have entered into that promise already. We already have that eternity. Therefore, and the therefore comes in chapter 12, and that's the next part, and probably the best part. But there's a lot in this that makes us think we're all part of that chain. We all serve our purpose. We are all fulfilling our bit in the story, and we'll all be on the credit roll when it comes at the end. Thank you.